Hello and welcome to my first ever YouTube video. Today I'm going to be kicking things off by starting the first episode in a myth-busting mini-series. This is where I'm going to go through many contentious areas of the fitness industry and sort out what is fact and what is fiction. So I'll be covering things like fad diets and different fitness products like those ab stimulators, jaw trainers. Is there any merit to any of them? But today I'm going to be covering calories. What is a calorie? Should you bother tracking calories? What are the pitfalls of tracking calories? Does calories in, calories out even work? So without further ado, let's get to it. So first things first, what is a calorie? A calorie is simply a unit of energy, specifically a unit of heat energy. Do not overly concern yourself with that fact. That doesn't mean that going in a cold tub or a hot tub magically changes the way your body processes calories. If you really take issue with using calories, you can just say energy instead. The equation calories in, calories out can be replaced by energy in, energy out. And at least in the UK, we have kilojoules on all our food labels. So if you really want to, you can use kilojoules. It's not very wise. You won't be able to track exercise because calories are the commonplace units used when talking about exercise and nutrition. But the fundamental of a calorie is that it is just a unit of energy. So the main point within this video, calories in, calories out. The infamous question, does the equation work? Is it true or is it all just a farce? Calories in, calories out absolutely does work. That is the main myth within this video that needs to get busted. If anybody denies the validity of calories in, calories out, it is simply untrue. What calories in, calories out actually means is, if you have consumed more calories than you have expended within a set time period, so we'll say within a day, the total energy value of your body's tissue will increase by the amount that you have been in a surplus. And by contrast, if you have consumed less calories than you have burnt, you will be in an energy deficit. And the total energy value of your body's tissue will decrease by the amount that you are in a deficit. Now, that might sound slightly wordy and complicated. I'm being very specific here because being in a calorie surplus does not necessarily mean your body will gain weight or fat or muscle. And being in a calorie deficit does not necessarily mean your body will lose weight or fat or muscle. That is to do with body composition. Over a long period of time, it almost definitely works out that a calorie surplus increases fat and weight. And it almost definitely means that if you sustain a calorie deficit, you will lose weight and fat. But there are things like water weight and the different levels of body composition which slightly alter this. I'm going to cover that in a minute, but the first thing is to say that calories in, calories out is true because of a fundamental law of physics. This is called the first law of thermodynamics. And what this states is, energy cannot be created or destroyed within a system. What that means is, if you have consumed 2,000 calories in a day, you've expended 2,500 calories within that day, you're in a 500 calorie deficit. Your body cannot create those 500 calories back to make you at maintenance, and it can't create 800 calories so that you've gone from a 500 calorie deficit to a 300 calorie surplus. By the same token, it can't destroy energy. So if you've consumed 3,000 calories in a day and you've burnt 2,500 calories off, you're in a 500 calorie surplus. Your body can't destroy those 500 calories to make you at maintenance, and it can't destroy 800 calories to put you in a 300 calorie deficit from that 500 calorie surplus. What it simply means is that if you're in an energy surplus, that energy has to go somewhere and it will be accumulated as some form of bodily tissue. And if you are in an energy deficit, that amount of energy has to come out of your body. So the next thing to come on to is the different sides of the calories in, calories out equation. What it actually is three sides. there's calories in, calories out, and calories used. So we'll cover calories in first. That's the simplest. Whatever you eat / drink is your calories in. That's your caloric consumption. If it comes through your mouth, that's your calories in. For calories out, there are 5 different ways that calories can exit the body and be expended in calories out, not used. We'll come on to that later, but there are 5 different ways calories can be expended before they're used. So the first one is simply the opposite of eating, is going to the toilet. Going to the toilet does actually contain calories and is part of the calories out. The other 4 ways are, the first of them is your metabolism. That is the amount of calories you expend while completely at rest just in order to keep your body alive. So it's things like your heart beating, all of your organs working, the processes within your body that are required to keep you alive, but are not you moving at all. It's just the basics to keep you alive. That is your metabolism. The second way that calories are expended is exercise activity thermogenesis, or just exercise. That is when you do dedicated exercise that requires energy, and that's the calories that are used. So biking, running, swimming, hiking, diving, whatever dedicated sport, resistance training, whatever dedicated sport you're doing that burns calories while performing exercise. The third way that energy is lost is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that is calories that are burned while you do your habitual actions during the day, but you're not doing dedicated exercise. So it could be clicking a pen, it could be tapping your foot under your desk at work. It could be like shuffling a bit or like moving your head and bobbing your head to music. It's not dedicated exercise. You've not gone out for a run. You've not gone out to bob your head and tap your foot under the chair. It's just something that happens. Whilst I'm talking now and moving my hand around, this is burning calories. It's more calories than you would think. And it's one of the first things that alters when people diet. What occurs is you reduce your caloric intake, you feel more tired, so you stop tapping your foot under the desk, you stop clicking the pen, you stop bobbing your head to music, you become a little bit more zombified, and you burn less calories. This is one of the pitfalls of calories in, calories out, is if you reduce your caloric intake by 500 calories, that does not necessarily mean you are in a 500 calorie deficit. The NEAT is a good example of something that could drop. Instead of burning, maybe per day you were burning 500 calories of NEAT just by moving around and tapping and twitching and being yourself and expressing yourself while talking. Instead, you feel more tired. You can't be bothered to tap away, and your NEAT drops to 400 calories a day. And again, that's not a big drop. It's important to note now that your body can never overcompensate. It can never lower the calories that it burns by more than you've lowered your intake. So if you lower your intake by 500 calories, your body can't lower its NEAT or lower its metabolism by more. If that was possible, it would be great. Let's just lower our calories by all the calories we consume and not eat, and our body will just magically stop burning. That's not the way that it works. And the last way that calories can be expended within the body is through something called the thermic effect of food. What this essentially is when you eat foods, energy is required to digest and process those foods and turn them into either usable energy or to store them as some form of body tissue. For example, if you are at maintenance and then you eat an apple extra, that apple surplus, that surplus needs to get stored as body tissue. You don't store an apple here. You store body fat. And in order to change the molecules of that apple into fat, energy is lost. Basically, energy isn't converted perfectly. Now, the thermic effect of food varies depending on the type of food that you eat. So if your food contains proteins and carbohydrates, they have a higher thermic effect of food. basically because it is less metabolically efficient to transfer those proteins and carbohydrates into usable energy or body tissues. However, if you're eating something that contains a lot of fat, fat is very metabolically efficient. And basically, all those calories from the fat gets converted into either usable energy or body tissues. So the thermic effect of fat is somewhere in the range of 0 to 5%. The thermic effect of carbohydrate is somewhere in the range of 5 to 10%, and the thermic effect of protein is somewhere between 20 and 30%. What this means is if you're in a 200 calorie surplus and those calories are coming from olive oil or butter or some form of edible fat, those 200 calories of edible fat convert into basically 95 to 100% of the calories that it was coming from. So of those 200 calories, you get 190 to 200 calories that get accumulated into body fat. If you are in a 200 calorie surplus of carbohydrate, however, because it has a higher thermic effect of food in the 5 to 10% range, the 200 calories that you've eaten from carbohydrates only convert into 180 to 190 calories worth of body fat. And if you're eating 200 calories of protein surplus, protein has a very high thermic effect of food in the range of 20 to 30%. So those 200 calories from protein convert into only 140 to 160 calories of body fat. You're essentially losing 20 to 30% of the energy that's coming from that protein in the conversion process of turning whatever you've eaten that's full of protein into body fat tissue. Another thing I'll note quickly is the different calorie amounts in food in your main macros. Your macros are your carbohydrates, your fats, and your proteins. They make up the bulk of your calories. And in carbohydrates and protein, there are 4 calories per gram. In fats, there are 9 calories per gram of fat. Fat's more energy dense. We discussed how body fat was more energy dense than muscle tissue earlier, but edible fats are also more energy dense than protein and carbohydrates. And finally, we come on to energies used, the final part of the calories in, calories out equation that isn't really talked about. This is what happens to the calories after energy in and energy out. Where do the excess calories go? And sometimes these are not just excess calories. It doesn't mean that these processes can only happen within a surplus. Sometimes calories are required to do this partway through, so it affects the calories outside. The first one is growth. Children and teenagers, when you're growing, energy is required to grow all of your body's tissues. People often reminisce about when they're teenagers and they could eat anything. That's because the energy that you're eating is going into growing like all tissues, your bones, your organs, your tendons and ligaments. A myth that I'll debunk right now is people often talk about weightlifting, maybe stunting growth. There's no evidence for that. But in growth, being under eating calories is the only time that there is evidence for stunting growth. This usually occurs in sports like ballet, in gymnastics, in like ice skating, particularly for females where they're trying to keep very slight and agile figures that their body's then able to do these incredible feats. They're told to restrict their calories so that they're light. In ballet, it's maybe so that they're light for lifting, and also for the aesthetic purposes, they want them to be thinner. That is the only circumstance that is equated to actually stunting growth in terms of height and bones. There's no evidence that lifting weight stunts growth. The last two uses for energy in the calories used part is very simple. They can either be used to gain fat tissue or they can be used to gain muscle tissue. These are the different variables, the different ways that calories can be used once you've reached adult maturity. Once the growth is complete, you're done. These are the two different types of body tissues that will be affected by your caloric intake and the way that you train. There's no way that you train that makes you build extra bone tissue or other tissues that you grow. It's simply muscle and fat.